My name is Sarah Bennett, and I'm 31 years old. The moment that changed everything happened at my brother's engagement party in my parents' backyard in Ohio. On a warm June evening that should have been filled with joy, there were about 40 people, their family, close friends, neighbors who'd known us for years. My brother Kevin stood with his fiancée Amanda, both of them glowing with that particular happiness of people who'd found exactly what they were looking for in life. My father, Tom Bennett, has always been the kind of man who loves an audience, a retired insurance executive with a booming voice and a joke for every occasion. He thrived at gatherings like this. As the evening wore on and the wine flowed freely, he clinked his glass to make a toast. To my son Kevin, he began, his arm around my mother Linda, who's always made us proud, who knew exactly what he wanted and went after it. Everyone raised their glasses. I stood near the edge of the patio, holding my drink, smiling like I was supposed to. Then my father's eyes found me, and something shifted in his expression. That look I'd seen 1,000 times before, amusement mixed with dismissal. "You know," he continued, his voice carrying across the yard, "some kids make you proud. Others just take up space." There was a beat of silence, and then laughter rippled through the crowd. Nervous laughter from some, genuine amusement from others who thought it was just Tom being Tom, making one of his characteristically blunt jokes. My mother touched his arm, murmuring something I couldn't hear, but she was smiling too. Kevin looked uncomfortable for a moment, but Amanda whispered something to him and he relaxed. I stood there, the words settling around me like stones, taking up space. That's what I was to them. Not a disappointment exactly, just excess. Unnecessary. I smiled. I actually smiled, because that's what you do when you're the punchline of someone else's joke. Good thing I just got my own place 3,000 miles away. I said, keeping my voice light and steady. Don't worry, you'll never have to worry about the space I take up again. A few people chuckled, thinking I was playing along. My father raised his glass to me, oblivious or uncaring about what he just revealed. But my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, caught my eye from across the patio. She wasn't laughing. I left the party an hour later, hugging Kevin and Amanda, congratulating them with genuine warmth. Whatever my father thought of me, my brother's happiness was real and deserved celebrating. In my car, driving back to the apartment I was staying in for the weekend, I let myself feel it, the hurt, the anger, the bone-deep exhaustion of spending 31 years trying to matter to people who'd already decided I didn't. The truth was, I'd already accepted a position in Portland, Oregon, a senior editor role at a small but respected publishing house that specialized in debut authors and overlooked voices. I'd been planning to tell everyone that weekend. Now, I was just glad I hadn't. 2 weeks later, I loaded everything I owned into a moving truck and drove west. Portland welcomed me with gray skies and green trees and the most beautiful sense of possibility I'd ever felt. The publishing house, Cascade Books, was everything I'd hoped for. Passionate people who believed stories could change lives, who saw value in voices that others overlooked. My boss, Margaret Chen, was 62 and had been in publishing for 40 years. She took me to lunch my first week. "You have good instincts," she said, reviewing a manuscript I'd flagged as promising. "You see potential where others see problems. That's a rare gift." It was the first time in my professional life that someone had called me gifted instead of difficult, passionate instead of stubborn, thorough instead of slow. I threw myself into the work. I found debut authors who'd been rejected by dozens of other houses. I worked with them, believed in them, fought for their stories. Within a year, 3 of our books hit regional bestseller lists. Within 2 years, 1 hit the national list. My apartment was small but mine. 1 bedroom in a converted house with a garden I could use. I planted tomatoes and herbs, learned to make jam from the berries that grew wild along the fence. I made friends with my neighbors, People who knew nothing about who I'd been back in Ohio and only cared about who I was now. I dated occasionally, nothing serious. I joined a book club, took a pottery class, volunteered at a literacy program teaching adults to read. I built a life that felt like mine, not a rule someone else had written for me. My family and I spoke occasionally. Surface-level calls on holidays. My mother would ask if I was eating enough. My father would make jokes about the big city editor. Kevin would tell me about wedding planning, and then, later, about home renovations. No one asked how I really was. No one asked if I was happy. And I didn't tell them, because I'd learned that some people don't actually want to know. They just want confirmation that you're fine, so they don't have to think about you too deeply. 3 years after I left, Margaret called me into her office. "I'm retiring," she said simply, "and I'm recommending you as my replacement. The board has already approved it. If you want it, the position is yours. Editorial director. My own imprint. The ability to shape not just individual books, but the entire direction of the house." Yes, I said, not even needing to think about it. Absolutely yes. The announcement went out the following week. It made industry news I was young for the position, and Cascade was punching above its weight class in the publishing world. That's when my phone started ringing. First Kevin, genuinely happy for me, apologizing that he couldn't talk long because the baby was crying. Yes, I was an aunt now, though I'd only seen my nephew twice, both times when I'd flown back for brief visits. Then my mother, her voice bright with surprise. "Director, that sounds very impressive, honey. Your father will be so proud." But he didn't call. 2 weeks after the announcement, a package arrived at my office. Inside was a framed photo of me as a little girl, sitting in my father's lap, both of us reading a book together. I was maybe 5 years old, completely absorbed in whatever story we were sharing. There was a note in my father's handwriting. "Found this while cleaning out the garage. Thought you might want it. Congratulations on the promotion." I stared at that photo for a long time. I'd forgotten that version of us, the one where I was small enough to fit in his lap. Before I'd grown into someone who didn't fit his expectations, I almost called him, almost picked up the phone to bridge the gap he'd created, and I'd widened by leaving. But then I remembered that night in the backyard. Some kids make you proud. Others just take up space. Instead, I wrote him a letter. I've always been better with written words than spoken ones. "Dad," I wrote, "thank you for the photo. I don't remember us reading together like that, but I'm glad we did once. I wanted you to know that the space I take up now is exactly the space I meant to fill. I'm proud of what I've built, even if it's not what you imagined for me. I hope someday you can be proud of it too. Not because it's impressive by someone else's standards, but because it's mine and I earned it. I love you, but I don't need your approval anymore to know my life has value." I sent it, and I waited. 3 weeks later, my phone rang. My father's name on the screen. "Sarah," he said, and his voice sounded older than I remembered. "I got your letter. I read it several times." "Okay," I said, not sure what else to say. "I was cruel," he said simply, "at Kevin's party and a lot of times before that. Your mother says I've been cruel for years, in little ways I didn't even notice. She's right." I waited. I don't know how to explain it except to say that you were never what I expected. From the time you were small, you were your own person. Strong-willed, independent, creative in ways I didn't understand. It scared me. I thought if I pushed you towards something more practical, more like what I knew, you'd be safer, more successful. He paused, and I could hear him breathing. "But you were already successful. You were already exactly who you needed to be. I just couldn't see it. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so deeply sorry." I sat down, my legs suddenly weak. "Why now?" I asked. "Why are you saying this now?" "Because your mother made me read everything you've published online. the interviews, the essays about books and reading and giving voice to people who've been silenced. And I finally understood what you've been doing all along. You've been making space for other people. Good space. Important space. And I called it taking up space like it was something worthless. He was crying. I'd never heard my father cry before. The truth is, Sarah, you're the one I should have been learning from. You left because we made you feel small, and instead of shrinking, you grew. You became exactly who you were meant to be. That takes courage I don't think I've ever had. We talked for 2 hours that night. Really talked, maybe for the first time since I was that little girl in the photo. Before life got complicated and expectations got in the way. He asked about my life, my work, my tiny garden and my small apartment, and my careful, intentional existence 3,000 miles away. He listened in a way he'd never listened before. Can I visit? He asked finally. Can I see what you built? Yes, I said. I'd like that. He came a month later, just him for 4 days. I showed him Portland, the bookstores, the coffee shops, my office where my name was now on the door. I introduced him to Margaret, who told him I was the best decision she'd ever made. I took him to dinner with my book club, where he sat quietly and watched me laugh with my friends. On his last night, we sat in my small garden as the sun set. This is a good life, he said. A really good life. It is, I agreed. I'm proud of you, he said. I know I should have said it a long time ago. I'm saying it now. I'm so proud of you, Sarah. Those words, the ones I'd waited my whole life to hear, settled around me gently. They mattered, but they didn't define me anymore. I'd already learned to be proud of myself. Thank you, I said simply. We sat in comfortable silence, and I realized something important. I'd left to find space for myself, but in doing so, I'd also made space for him to grow. Sometimes distance is what love needs to become real. The space I take up now is deliberate and earned. It's filled with books I helped bring into the world, friendships I've nurtured, quiet mornings with coffee and plants, work that matters. My father was wrong that night 3 years ago. I don't just take up space, I create it. For myself, for the authors I champion, for the stories that need to be told. And that, I've learned, is more than enough.